So good afternoon again, folks. Thanks for coming back. The reviewers are all nice and refreshed. Once again, our reviewers with us are Edgar Adams here from Roger Williams University, Carlos Reimers from Catholic University, Ed Dunstan from Howard University, Carlo Achille from the beautiful city of Florence, in Florence, Italy, ISL Florence. Marcus King from Detroit, no, I'm just, he's from Washington, D.C. now. And Jason Winters joining us this afternoon. We have now Christopher Reyes is going to be bringing forward still that theme about treatment and wellness and recovery. And Chris's thesis committee was composed of James Tillman, myself, and Carl Bolville, and Jason Winters acted as the professional mentor in the project. It's all yours.
Yes, all right. Hi, all right. Ooh, this is a different, interesting experience I want to come through. So first of all, I'd like to thank my professors, Professor Tillman, Professor Jason Winters, Professor Kelly, and Professor Carl Bolville. Without them, I know I wouldn't be able to push my limits into achieving something so interesting as come to a design like this. And so really what this thesis is going to be proposing about is studying what ritual is in healthcare and questioning if there even is one in healthcare, and how do you alleviate an experience for someone who has cancer and is going through treatment. So when I first began this process here, the first two questions I asked myself is what is ritual and how does this really relate to healthcare? Because we don't really question this kind of things. We kind of just go to the doctors and we go get checked up and then we go home and try to live our lives. And in a way, there's not really an alleviating kind of moment to find out what's happening with you. So the first thing I did was even look up what ritual even means. And so I found out it was in these three different categories where it can be something traditional, where it's something that is a birthday or a holiday that you celebrate annually. It can be something sacred where you go and worship, or you're doing a pilgrimage, or even something habitual that's a daily kind of thing. And so really what I'm focusing on is this habitual type of ritual that starts to inform how can I start to take this and start turning into a design in a sense. And so really starting to look into this, what really habitual really means is that it's a sense of place. In a way, it's an experience, and even in this diagram here, what I've done was that a simple idea is when you wake up in your bedroom, you take a specific amount of steps, you start to define what the space and time even means around you without even even thinking about it in a sense. You're using all of your senses to understand the spaces around you, so you know exactly how many steps it takes to get from the dresser all the way to the bathroom to your bedroom and so on without even thinking about it. So your senses are manifesting within itself and taking on its own thing without you really thinking about anything. And so with this idea of with having something habitual, one day typically your day would be, you wake up, go to work, have lunch, go home, have dinner, and you have this this kind of daily cycle. And then all of a sudden one day, whether it's somebody whether it's you or somebody that you know and care about really deeply, starts to feel a little ill, and they don't know exactly what's really going on, and this has been happening for about the last couple of days, maybe weeks, and at this point they finally decide, let's go see the doctor, let's go see what's going on with me. So then once they go there, the doctor runs a couple of exams and tests, and then all of a sudden they find out that they claim that you have been officially diagnosed with a chronic illness. And so now you're kind of, all of a sudden, your world is flipped upside down, and they tell you to go through treatment, and you go through this cycle of treatment where, in a way, treatment actually kind of defeats you from the inside. It weakens your immune systems, it makes you tired and weak, and that you have to fight it, and it's not an easy battle. And so with my experience that I've been through, at least with a family member of mine, which is my father, the day that we found out that he was diagnosed with cancer was that it was at 8 in the morning in his own bedroom. As soon as he woke up, the phone call rang, and that's what woke him up, and all of a sudden our world became flipped upside down, right? So in a way, it's very important to be able to discuss these kinds of private, intimate moments in the right setting and in the right time. last thing you want to have be told is that you have cancer in your own bedroom, right? So then, really questioning then the beginning of that ritual sequence is the treatment process. So how do you alleviate that, right? And in a way, not everybody can finish their treatment because it's so difficult, and that the chemotherapy or the radiation or even surgery can really weaken you up to the point where you can't even finish it all the time. So there's never really a full certainty of a final accomplishment, right? But for those that have been able to finish it, what is that final celebration moment like? You know, and so we really don't take advantage of this. And for the most part, what it seems as though that once you finish a treatment, you have a certificate saying congratulations, you finished it, right? So there's no real actual celebration that isn't really taking advantage of. And so, in my experience of seeing what these moments are like when you're going through treatment. For instance, in the radiation type of treatment where you're going through radiology oncology, really the sequence here is just showing that you come in to the waiting room, you check in, you go to the exam room to see how you're doing, and then the doctor tells you, okay, let's go get dressed and let's go to the linear accelerator vault, and then let's blast you with some x-rays, and then you're off to go home. So in a way, this is probably the fastest type of treatment. It takes about 15 minutes. You're in and you're out, no problem. The next treatment is infusion, which is chemotherapy. And this one's a little bit more time consuming because these types of treatments can last about 3 to 4 hours on average. So really the experience on this is that it's the same ordeal. You always check in, you get checked out, but then they take your blood as a sample to see if you're doing okay, see if chemotherapy is working, and see how much dosage do you really need, because sometimes too much dosage is not good for you. And so then after they do all that, it takes another hour or so to get the chemo get prepped up, and then eventually you get put into infusion, and you're stuck into this little small cubicle space to the point where it becomes kind of this uncomfortable type of experience. And so with this kind of diagram that I've shown is that in the experience that I've seen that my father going through this chemotherapy was that you have that small cubicle space, but then you can't even have other people sit inside the same space. The space inside is really only meant for one person. But if you're bringing more than one, then how do you really feel as though that you're in a safe environment, in a sense? What happens in hospitals is that they try to cram in as many patients as possible, which then starts to affect this type of this space making and this type of alleviation. So the more people you add in, the more crammed it gets and the more uncomfortable it gets. And you can't really be as close as you'd like to with your family. And so the final one, which is a surgical experience, which is the most frightening one. So really, in this kind of sequence, what I'm trying to show here with these pulses is that you start to feel nervous and you have anxiety and a lot of different emotions are running through you. So really the moment you actually come onto the campus itself before you even enter into the building, the anxiety really starts to kick in and shoot up. And then once you check in, the issue is that you want to make sure that it's an easy way to get to where you need to go to. And so my experience, at least in Johns Hopkins, these hallways seem really infinite. They seem all the same and very similar. You never know where to turn. So all of a sudden, the anxiety starts to build up more and more because you want to make sure that you're getting there on time and that you're not going to be late and that everything is going to be okay. But then once you finally get to that waiting room, you can finally take a deep breath and check in. And then finally, when it's time to get called up, the patient is eventually taken to the preoperative to go get dressed and get changed before anesthesia. And before the surgery actually happens, you're called to go say your final words to them before they go off to the surgery because you never know what's going to happen as that result. And so as the doctor tells you exactly what's going to happen, you get sent back to the waiting room as the surgery commences. And then finally, the consultation space. In this case here, it is the most crucial part or crucial space in the entire sequence of this ritual. In my experience of this, the consultation space was inside the waiting room, right? And at that point, it's the most uncomfortable thing you could ever be in because of the fact that once you go in there, you never know how long it's going to take for this doctor going to come in. And on top of that, you don't know what this result's going to be. And so if you end up having an unfortunate result where to the point that they can't do anything about what's happening to the patient, this room has to be a place that's comfortable enough for everybody to release their emotions into. But then also, it's thinking about the people who are outside of that space. And so the issue is that once these people come out and they see that they're all sad, psychologically, everybody is imbalanced now because of the fact that the people who are waiting outside in this waiting room see the people coming out sad, and now they're scared because they don't know what's going to happen to either them or even to the person that they know is going through surgery. And that the fact that the people who just came out of the consultation space know that the other people know what happened to them, and so now in a way they either feel embarrassed or that it's private information that, although not verbally leaked out, subconsciously everybody knows what's going on. And so once everybody comes out of that consultation space, they're told to go to the patient room to see how the patient is doing, and at that point, that's where the family has to tell the patient exactly what's going on and what is happening, whether it's good or bad news. And so really, what I started looking into as this precedent studies is how can we start to alleviate this? Always asking me that question, like how do we alleviate this experience? And so in these two precedent examples of the Nanaimo Emergency Department in Vancouver and St. Charles Ben Center in Oregon, you can see that a huge focus is the landscape around it, where you can see that they put vegetation in courtyards so that way, as patients are recovering, they actually have something pleasant to look at other than just the wall or the ceiling above them. And in a way, having a sense of this vegetation can also help them recover faster, or even in a way distract them. And so what I'm trying to propose is that how do I have this architecture become a piece of distraction therapy? Because of the fact that obviously architecture cannot cure cancer, we can at least help distract the person's mind while they're getting the treatment or before or after in any part of the sequence of this. And so what I'd like to do is share to you what this final moment of celebration is like, because to me, very personally, as my dad finished his treatment, there was a final celebrational moment that became the impetus of my entire design project. So here you can see all the staff and everybody gathering together. So right there, you can see that how happy he's become because he finished his treatment that nobody else could really do. It's a very difficult thing. And so to me, I see that as a main driver for the project, that there should be a final ending to this, right? So to me, when I was starting to look into the design, I had to figure out, well, exactly what's an appropriate site to pick. So after looking at some of these major concerns, I was making sure that I wanted to have major access to this site. I wanted to make sure that I have a good amount of landscapes and topography to play with, and that the fact that I have pleasant views, and making sure that all this ties into one full sequence. So the site that I have chosen is actually near Annapolis. So it's about 15 minutes away from Annapolis, so located from here. This is the downtown area over here. And there's actually the Anne Arundel Medical Hospital that we were at. That's about a 15-minute drive from there. So this building could act as an extension to the hospital where they actually do the chemotherapy there, or any type of treatment. And so zooming in onto this area here, it's in this location that's located along the Severn River Sanctuary. So it's a river that connects down to the Chesapeake Bay. And along the edge of it is another bay that you can see there. And along all of here is that there's a bunch of private residential houses that take upon the waterfront. And so giving you a better idea of what this area looks like, because of the fact that since I couldn't get to the site, it was gated off and it was blocked off. So I'd like to show you just the context of what the Severn River even looks like. And so on this, you have a really important bridge here called the Severn River Bridge, and the bridge beyond that is the Naval Academy Bridge. And so down here, as you can start to see a little bit of the downtown Annapolis area where the Naval Academy is located at. And just right around here, around that corner, is where my site will be located at. You can see that there are certain points on this topography here that it gets really close to the water, and that there are other points where it actually becomes a cliffside. And so in my site, it actually becomes more of that cliffside here. And understanding exactly what constraints I'm having here, understanding that I will be having south light hitting this building, but then also on the north side where the water's at will be more of the north light that I can take advantage of. So looking at this here, you can see that in this area, I have two major swales where I wanted to place my site right in between that, and that in this area, we can see as a section cut, we can see that this cliffside is about a 60-foot drop all the way down to the water. So that way, it gives me opportunity to start really engaging into this site and really start digging into this landscape. And so before I started doing that, I started looking into the program and trying to see what types of treatments can this place actually offer, whether it's something that's proton therapy that involves giant gantry chambers, it could be cryotherapy, it can be electron therapy, it can be neutron therapy, it can be surgical, it can be really anything. And so to me, to make this program more humbling for the site that it's asking for, I decided to keep it as just a regular type of treatment where it's like you just come in and get infusion, you come in to go get radiology with the linear accelerator, or it's more of the non-invasive procedures where they put a camera in you as an endoscopy type. So that way you recover for a couple hours at most, and then you're able to go home the same day. And so I started looking into different types of forms and seeing how this can start to relate into part of this experience. And so you can see along here, I started coming up with these process vignettes and trying to like understand, well, what makes this sequence really great, or what can I do to make this really great? And what I've noticed was that now all of these images here, that you either have a view towards a piece of nature or a view back out towards the landscape. And in a way, that can start to create the distraction therapy and create a sense of contemplation as one is staring at these natural elements in here. So quickly looking through the site and the way how I organized this building was that taking upon those two swales, I was able to make sure that I had this view back out towards the water, but then also looking at the language of the swales and connecting it and creating more of a panoramic view back out towards the water. And then having a core space in the middle where everybody can actually come in and actually use it. And so that's surrounding it. Here you have more of the public area, and then over here you have more of the clinical area that actually starts looking into the landscape. And so in here, where it's more of a semi-private space, where everybody can actually circulate in to reach all levels, this becomes a transition between the public to the clinical and try to create a new, different type of experience. And so understanding the massings that this will be a 4-story type of building, but the thing is, it won't look like that when you're on the surface level, because 2 of these levels will be underneath. And so just understanding that as I place this in here, you can see that this is the existing topography that's happening with the 2 swales. I decided to insert this building in here and start to depress the landscape. So instead of making hard edges, I decided to terrace the landscape away so it feels as though that the building starts to become more homogeneous with the landscape. So in a way, the building is giving to the landscape is giving back into the building. And then understanding the sequence part of it when you're approaching this building, at the beginning of the site, there's a traffic circle that can divert the staff and visitors from the actual services. So as you're coming along this bend, you start approaching that swale, and using that topography of that swale, you actually enter in an underground level and not on the surface level. And so with the services around that as well, they enter in 2 levels below that. So that way they're more hidden within the landscape, and it's not a place that you can actually see. And so in this proposed site plan, you can start to see how the building starts to tail off into the landscape and becomes more integrated. You can see that the terracing is starting to resemble more of the geometry of the that's happening there, that circular geometry. And then looking at these views here that I've been taking into account to is what's the experience if you're on the boat, because there's a lot of recreational activity happening on the Severn River. What's the experience from this aerial view, seeing that how you can start to see that all of this is becoming terraced, and that you can start to see the landscape starting to blend in within this building. And in the section cut here, you can start to see that what I was attempting to make was that in this bottom space right here on this very lower level was going to be the contemplation space, which is going to create a different atmosphere than for the people who are entering onto this level. So once you enter into the first floor, here's that drop off, and then you enter into here, and the thing is, the interesting experience is that it doesn't seem as though that you're at the very bottom ground, that there's still another ground below you, so you can still look down as you come into the space. And then along here is where we have the vertical gallery, which is going to be the connection between the public realm and the actual clinical realm of how you transfer between the two. And then on the second level here, as long as you see all of these bands here, they become these consultation suites or these exam rooms for people to go and use, and then eventually they're told to go off to the treatment. So on this final level here that you see on the very top would be the actual infusion space, so they have a nice panoramic scenic view back out towards the water. And then so I'd like to take you through the sequence of what it's like approaching this building and going through these spaces. So here in this image over here is the entrance basically from where you're coming on that traffic circle. And this is coming along the bend, and where this red dot is representing is where the actual drop-off location is at. So this is the building that you're going to be seeing as you're approaching in this threshold. And once you enter into this building, you can see that in this area it becomes the actual entry space, so you can start to see that there's vegetation within inside of it. You can see that there's this natural light highlighting where this main entry is this, to this vertical gallery that connects everybody to it. And with this space, you can see that it already starts to have a direct, clear view back out towards the water. And down here, which is the common space where you'd be waiting for your appointment to be called for, you can start to see that people are starting to become distracted by the water and seeing all the recreation. I mean, who doesn't want to be out there in the water on the boat right now, you know? So in a way, that becomes part of a goal, and mentally, it starts to make them more excited about finishing their treatment and getting out there again. The next thing I thought about was the exam spaces, which I thought was really important, because typically what happens is that once you're in an exam room, this is the current situation what it's like, where the doctor sits on the stool, the patient sits on the exam bed, and then the family or the visitor sits on the chair onto the side. And in a way, there's no direct, clear eye contact with each other. Nobody's at the same level. So what I was experimenting with was to see how can I actually put them all on the same level and actually think about the experience as one actually walks into the exam room and gets settled in. So in a way, I had to make sure that there was enough seating for more than just 2 or 3 people, because more than likely, if there's a situation like this, it's going to be the whole family. So I wanted to provide enough space for people to actually be in here, and that seeing that in this area here would be where the doctor would be sitting at to be able to speak to both the visitors and the patient who would be sitting on this exam bed, whether it's an adult, but more than likely if it was a child, then they would probably be sitting on this on the couch near with their family, so that way they can still talk and have this direct eye contact. And then the final thing was that what I wanted to make sure was to make it feel like it's more like spa-like, you know, removing all the medical wall cabinets and removing all the medical equipment off those walls. Although that it is convenient that these can be stored elsewhere, in a way, it doesn't feel as though that you're in this in a typical exam room. That in a way that as the person who's sitting on this exam bed, they actually would view back out towards the water, which then can distract them from what's happening, to start to alleviate that moment. And then also having a sense of communication to make sure that the doctor can actually show the information on the screen, that there is nothing to hide from them. Because typically as the doctor's typing away, you can't see what they're doing, so in a way, it's not a clear communication visually. So I wanted to make sure that you can always see what's going on, that the doctor can always show you what's going on. And so here, you can see that these are the other types of exam rooms. So as we just saw this one's more of the recovery room, so it's the same ordeal where you actually have a view back out towards the landscape, and so that way you can be distracted, and that family can still wait there as you're going through your procedures. And then in this very bottom, in this bottom rendering here, you can see that this is the infusion space. So in a way, what I wanted to do is that since a lot of people would be coming here, I wanted to create a more of an open atmosphere where they can choose to sit wherever they like. They can speak to whoever they like, whether it's other members of family or even another patient who's going through there. And the further they go back, it becomes a little bit more private for more of the intimate moments where families want to be more alone with each other. So in a way, I'm trying to provide all types of amenities for each type of scenario for these families. And then finally, when we get down to this very bottom space, the contemplation space, here you can see that it's surrounded by nature in a way that I wanted to make sure that all this plantings and nature inside of it was to be artificial, because as your immune system gets weak, even the sense of plants can make you feel ill. So what I wanted to make sure was that in this space here, that they have an object to focus on as they're sitting here, understanding what if they find out that they got diagnosed, or what if they're going through the treatment right there. In a way, this space becomes a moment of relief and hope, because right here, what you see at the final moment is that final celebration at the end of the ritual, and that's the goal that they're looking forward to, that they can see it as. And so what I'd like to do before I start wrapping this up is to show you a quick fly-through of what this building could be like as the experience is one's going through this. And so here we enter into the common space. These people that are glowing are people who are affected or know of someone that is affected by cancer at the moment. Over here, you can see that this is a workspace. So for anybody who's waiting for somebody else who's getting treatment at that time, they can come here and think to themselves or work by themselves. And here you can start to see that area of that celebration moment. And so here we start to enter into more of the clinical side of this building. And here you have a view back out towards the landscape as well to become distracted. So here's the Infusion Treatment Center with more of the private bays towards the end of this. Thank you.
Switch. There you go. First of all, very good choice for the area. The location for this building is amazing. In front of the ocean, and I think also for the function of the building itself, it's really important to deal with the landscaping with this interesting and beautiful environment. Another thing that I really appreciate, I think the architecture in general should be also emotion. And this building matched perfectly with the area in terms of shape, in terms of form. Reminds me the idea of this vertical gallery. If you look from the ocean, it could be a kind of lighthouse,
Right.
So in terms of context, I think works. At the same time, also the chimney, so it's also the profile of your section reminds me of boat, like an
Right.
harp or
Like a vessel.
so I think that the form works very well. Beautiful drawings, the interiors design, your freehand sketching, give us the opportunity to deal deeply in this project. We can appreciate all the aspects. One question personally is about the level 0.
Yes.
I wonder, so the level 0, you have a kind of the central space
Yes.
that I would like to call like an indoor piazza. As a piazza, usually piazza works when you have a lot of connection with the street around. And I wonder the reason because you have the piazza at the level 0 rather than at the level 1. Maybe because of the level 1 you have a more opportunity to make a connection with all activities. Because if I'm going to the level 0, you have the island, but you have basically just a bench, one bench.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So maybe that could be something that could be developed to have this gathering space in relation with more functional one instead of one. That's my
Yeah, I can see that happening.
advice.
I can see that happening.
And the last two things before colleagues' other opinion, I don't understand the rooftop that you presented is beautiful drawings. Is a green space? Is a green rooftop?
It's a green rooftop, but it's not accessible for people to walk onto.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about in the first board? That is more reddish pink.
That's more of like what it could be like as an auto kind of feel to it. That was kind of more of the graphic style that I was trying to achieve to it.
No, because I don't know the area.
Yeah.
I wonder it's a more rock probably.
Oh no, yeah. So
rock.
it's not very like hard rocky like, but it's more soil like
So it's
along that area.
grass.
Yeah, it's mostly grass around that area.
Because I really like also the rock.
Yeah.
Reddish.
Thank you.
Really love your drawings, Chris. Very elegant. I love the way the building sits on the site. I think that's fantastic. I mean, it actually looks like it belongs there within the site. One question that I had about your project was the location of the sort of bell ringing space. Can you talk about why you chose to put it where you did?
So, in my experience was that when one day when I went with my father and my mother to go get his checkup to see how everything was going, we were in the exam room speaking with one of the nurses, and then all of a sudden we actually heard a bell ringing noise in the background. And we were kind of wondering, well, what is that? Because we kept hearing it consistently. And then all of a sudden the nurse says, oh, that's the thing that you do when you finish your treatment. So in a way, there's an audible kind of sense that even though I wasn't in that space when it was happening, I could still hear it from a different location. So more so like even physically in a way that you're forced to look up to see exactly that celebrational moment that you're down at the lowest level where you feel as though that's where you kind of feel at in life right now. You don't know what's going to happen to you, so you look up for that moment of hope, and then all of a sudden you see people ringing that bell as that final moment. And so to me, that's how I kind of saw that that location being at its most proper.
Was there any iteration where you kind of changed the way you rendered this sort of courtyard space to maybe allow more people to actually get a glance at that, or was it more choreographed to like be this sort of solid sort of courtyard space that you can't really get a glimpse of that moment from some of these other spaces?
Right.
Was it meant to be hidden?
In a way, yes, because it is still somewhat of an intimate moment that's meant more for the family. So although, yeah, you may not see it from like the actual common spaces back further in there, but you still have use looking back out to it. It's just that you're not physically in that space watching it all happen, as long as you still hear it audibly. So in a way, this is still a private thing for somebody to go through.
Okay. These are just questions to kind of probe you a little bit, but I actually love the whole concept, the narrative of it. Location can be debated, but I actually wish it was a little bit bigger. It just kind of looks like tucked away, and it's such a powerful moment, a along this ritual that you're defining, that I wish it was more celebrated, even the way that it's rendered in terms of, some of these perspectives. It reminds me of sort of like the Pope coming out, on this sort of balcony addressing people, down in this sort of contemplation space, right?
Right.
But taking that sort of motif, that sort of porch or that balcony is sort of rendered in a very special way. So is there a certain way we can sort of articulate that architecturally so that it separates itself from, all the other sort of monotone spaces and
Right.
surfaces in the space?
Yeah, no.
And really be upheld as this thing that everybody that's going through these rituals contains.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah. If there is in a way, almost.
I love it. I really love it. I just had a nephew go through who has leukemia, and he's going through like all this stuff. And I would love to be in these sort of infusion suite. I mean, fantastic, because the way these things work now is absolutely terrible, I think. But something like that, I could imagine him and his brothers sort of sitting there and him not feeling so isolated from
Right.
his family and all that stuff, and feeling these very austere environments. And I really love the way you crafted, the progression of space. So the initial thing that jumped out to me was that space of where the building happens. I would love to see a little more architectural articulation.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree on that.
I just had a question. It starts from the form. I too think the site and location is it's a great site. You for a lot of different things, but I think it's appropriate for what you intended for. But why that particular sort of Nautilus sort of look? How did that come about? Was that a sequence of movement?
Yeah, it was more so a sequence of movement, but to me, at least the process for me was more reverse engineered, so I actually began with the section cut. So understanding these certain moments that I wanted to keep into it, and then beginning to make the form around it. And so thinking about how this landscape starts to peel away, the building starts to do that with the roof at least, and really start to engage into it. So there are moves that I want to make sure that the building becomes engaged, such as the tail, but then also moves such as the chimney you guys speak of to allow, take advantage of that southern light, but to use that light to create a different atmosphere from the very bottom to the very top. Because in a way, at that very top, and you can see it this rendering here, you can see how the natural light actually hits that threshold of where you enter into that vertical gallery, because that indicates that's the very beginning of where treatment begins at, and then you're already at the very end of it. So in a way, you're kind of reflecting back at that moment.
Just one thing. Yeah. So, how did you decide? I mean, I'm just thinking, just trying to think through this. I look at the section. I look at your plan over here, and then I look at these renderings, and I just wonder. How much do you engage that cliff versus overlooking the cliff or hanging off the cliff? And did that have anything to do with how you located it and the shape that came out of that? Because the one real sequence is your arrival sequence, and then how did that play into its shape, but also the location of this building as it hangs off of this cliff? It's just a question.
It's a really,
it's kind of fascinating to me.
Thank you. I mean, for me, it was more so that I kind of, in a way, I guess I had so many different types of other building types. For at least me, weekly was a new building. So, to me, I kind of wanted to test out what this geometry can actually do for this landscape, and think a bit more as a terrace kind of idea. So if I was terracing the landscape, why can't I terrace the building as well to create that form? And so that's what was starting to create that geometry.
But was it more a case of a program that needed to go in?
Yeah, well, a lot of it.
That just allowed you then to have...
Yeah, so for me, I at least knew exactly where the program needed to be located at. The question was, well, what does the form want to be now? So to me, I saw it more as form follows function in a sense. So although I knew where the locations are going to be at, it can really be shaped to whatever it wanted to be. But in a way, I started noticing that it was starting to engage more and more with this landscape to kind of reflect or try to become this extension within the natural landscape that's already there. So that's how I kind of generated that form and that shape of it, or at least that circular shape.
I have a couple of operational questions. Like you, I went through this long process of seeing your very close relatives going through this. And I honestly, I know a lot about this just because I lived it.
Thank you. Yeah,
And I wish the best for your father.
Thank you.
So how you don't have operation rooms or anything like that?
No, so that was actually one of the earlier schemes that I thought about, but at that point, I thought the program was not as humble as what the landscape was really asking for.
But you do have cases in which you have something not going
Yes.
well. These people immediately.
Yes, so so for anything that's closest to surgical in a way, it's more like the endoscopy. So if they're going to put a camera in you, they can use lasers or anything inside of you to kind of.
That can happen here.
Yeah, and then you have a recovery room to stay in for at least 23 hours.
There is also people who are so weak that have to be brought in ambulances. Do you have that thought out?
Almost. I'm gonna be honest with you. It might be a little tight around that drop-off area to have it, but it is still a nice space to have an ambulance be there if necessary. But the reality is, to me, I see it as if you really need to go to an ambulance and use that, then you should be going to the actual hospital setting itself. This is more so for people who have a little bit more strength to be able to come out here and to have to be more relieved out of what's going on.
And I can accept that, but I would like to argue against it because for a person, it depends on. I hope that
Right.
my father actually was caught on time. My mother was not. So it was stage 4, and whatever you get out of life, it's extra. But you know
Right.
what's the end.
Right.
So for a person knowing that there's a routine, a ritual, like you have described it, that actually can allow that person to live their last years kind of in a sort of controlled environment is nice. Whereas if you have to go through stages where you eventually are moving to places that are away from what you have lived here and you designed, so well designed for people who are trying to recover, that's a very tough point.
Right.
And so I would strongly advise against what you're proposing here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
The other thing that I think is important, I think you have taken very well care about how the patient looks at this and what's the environment of the patient and how they can actually be surrounded by the relatives. But truly there's a more important thing here, which is how patients see other patients and how they learn from each other, and how relatives actually see other relatives and how they learn from each other. And I don't see that very clearly. I know it can happen because informal encounters will happen anyway, but I don't see that very well thought out in your. And don't get me wrong, I love your building, and I think a lot of what has to happen here could perfectly happen enhanced by your building. But I think that one of the things that I really enjoy in the 2 years and a half that took my mother to actually get to a stage in which she couldn't actually, nothing else could be done for her. I learned a lot while I went out of other people who had gone through the same process. And I know that she learned a lot out of talking to other people. Their setting was very different. It was a setting in which they actually look at each other. And what happened is they will talk to each other.
Right.
And so the only thing that I would be careful about with the people who manage the hospital is making sure that you have a very weekly patient sharing with people who were, living their lives somewhere.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they were there, but not in the same place. And eventually, I hope you never get to this, somebody doesn't come anymore. And you know what happened.
Right, yeah.
You know what happened with those things. So knowing about these things, I'm telling you, these things are important. I mean, this is a long-term relationship between patients and their physicians and relatives and their physicians and relatives and patients.
Right.
And you have to get used, which takes me to one more thing, which is I was lucky enough to actually have one of these centers in my city. So my life actually would not be waiting for 3 hours. It could actually go on. Because, 3 hours, I knew, how long is it going to be? 3 hours. And I would go, live my life, and come back. Because you honestly can't stop your life.
Right, exactly.
modern life doesn't let us do that. So it was actually, I heard that it's just 15 minutes away, which actually makes it okay if you live in Annapolis.
Yes.
But that's not necessarily the case. You may actually choose to take your people there, but you live in the city. So now it's not 15 minutes, it's an hour and a half
Right.
to get there. So although I think this could be an alternative, I don't necessarily think it should be the only alternative. I think that an urban alternative should also be there. I strongly appreciate what you've done here and how Headwell is clearly designed. I do have a question, which is there's two sort of important spaces in your project. One is a sort of internal atrium, you can call it, that is so introspective, and the other is the sort of wedge that goes outside, and there is some sort of competition between them. Do they mean anything?
In a way, I just wanted to think of it more as the extension coming out towards the water, being more connected towards that, because at least for the residents in Annapolis, that's a very important thing to take account of, that the waterfront is very important and special to everybody, especially being close to the Chesapeake Bay. So using that expression, I wanted this building to just really extend out there and really get as close as you can towards the
And
water.
so I agree with you. So do you think that then the atrium was important?
I still think it is more of an intimate moment. This is more of a public moment that anybody who's out there recreationally using their boats, they can see what's going on, the people out there can look back out. But for the internal moment here, to me, I feel as though that it's necessary for it to be like this because of the fact that...
But the internal, the one that you described is internal, is actually more public. It's going to be seen by anyone who goes into this building. Whereas the one that you described as more public is the most secluded one. So do you think there's a contradiction there?
Somewhat, but I still argue on that though, because of the fact that it's just a moment that with that one single bench, not everybody can use that space. So by limiting it to one bench, you can still only have you and your family members be there and still contemplate together and still look up at that ceremony. Yeah.
I just wanted to continue on a little bit, talking about the relationship to nature. Just a couple of things. You talk about a kind of therapeutic distraction, I
Yes.
think. I think you could dignify that relationship with the patient to nature even farther, because there is certainly a body of research out there about the healing effects of that relationship to nature. So I think it goes, distraction absolutely is important, but I think it also goes beyond distraction. So that was one thought, just maybe broaden that conversation. The other thought was about actual access to the outdoors. You've got this heart of the building that gives you this kind of celestial connection, which I think is terribly important. The idea that you really plant that building, that's that kind of axis mundi that connects you from the earth to the sky, and it's very powerful. Thinking about the horizontal extension, you're making a spiral and kind of spinning it off to kind of make that connection to the outdoors. But I guess I would suggest an even greater connection to the outdoors in several ways. So one thought is that green roof. It looks like you are, sort of spinning to bring that roof down to the ground so that people could just float from the ground right onto the ground building.
Right.
So there's great potential to actually use that space as a promenade. I think that, coming out from this very sort of hermetic experience at the center, you can give people the experience all the way out to the actual outdoors. And then the other thing is about the way the building sits in the landscape and about the way the ground is coming down to the water. It looks like it's all rendered as grass, and I think that kind of progression from that grassy plateau down the cliff really is, well, you want to think about what the edge is like. You're certainly not going to bring a lawnmower to the edge.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and so, there's probably some kind of barrier. There's probably a kind of rocky cliff face.
Well, in that area, it gets more sandy-like as it approaches the water. So
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think there's a layering
Yes.
process, and I think that your building is very layered. And if you engaged with those kind of geological layers, I think that might help out. And then the other thing is just, once again, I think that if you can go from that kind of heart of the building out to creating an outdoor experience, because this is a very precious piece of land. And the people who are coming here are coming to this beautiful natural place. And I think that a walk outdoors is another way to experience restorative nature, along with just that vision outside. You're very powerfully connecting people to the water,
Right.
visually from the building to the outside. But I think there's the potential here to think not just about how that building is spinning out into the landscape, but how you're also providing then outdoor rooms.
Right.
As an outdoor room.
In my earlier schemes, I actually did have that, and I was actually considering that. It's just after going through a bunch of different phases of these buildings and seeing which one works out, if I had more time for this, yeah, that was definitely going to be the next move as to thinking about, well, how do I start to integrate the landscape to have people come back out? So yeah, no, I 100% agree on that.
I think you're right. It's the next move. You've accomplished so much here,
Yeah.
and I'm just asking for more. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Terrific. Chris, it's been a privilege to have a connection with you for a while. I was your instructor in 600, the comprehensive studio, and then in the Thesis Pro seminar. So I've watched this project move from from a very personal place with you to, I think, an incredibly mature thesis project that's very complete. Complete to the extent that you and I have sort of, there's room to quibble about detail and material selection, and I think that's a wonderful place to be in a thesis. And it's a very balanced solution. I think your presentation was outstanding. So there's so much to hold on to here, and I hope you will move forward with all of the things that you've thought about here. And I really believe that there's a sensibility that's emerging here, and I would continue to have the courage of your conviction. So I want to congratulate you on finishing.
Thank you.